Okay, the next project that somebody had wanted was another back scratcher. And this one's going to be out of maple. And you can see it's going to have the nice pretty grain all the way down along. That's probably going to be facing up. And then I'm going to make I doubled up, since they did not want a just right angle and a thinner piece, I'd have to make a right angle. I'm going to do a wider piece with the grain facing up and countersink. Basically put that in so it's a handle again the whole way through. And then use the bandsaw and draw and shape so we have a nice curve that blends and matches the handle. That way we still have the strength of the grain coming up, and if we cut the teeth going in this direction, they should work much better than going in this direction, because going across they'll tend to want to blow out as easily, and it'll be easier to keep it in place when using the file to grind the teeth, or file the teeth, because when it's going this way it tends to want to sink into the softer parts of the wood in between the growth rings, or between the darker growth rings. But going across this direction, that should just go, like if I want to put a tooth there, it'll go right there and it'll stay. And then I move over and it'll go right there and stay. It won't want to try and pull itself in between the growth rings into the softer material. So I think that's going to work. Hopefully it'll work. It should. The others worked and they came out nice. So I think this is going to be really cool with the grain. And the grain is coming upward, and here the grain is coming upward. So it's kind of the same, but it would almost be better if it went this way. Then it would all match. But I think it's going to be a much stronger, more resilient back scratcher going in this direction. And with this side of the grain coming up, and when I round the handle, that should mean that there's fancy maple grain almost the whole way around, except for on the very side, depending on how much I get it rounded. So I think that's going to look pretty cool. And yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But that's the start of the next plan. And I'm probably going to put a hole through it to have a hanger. That way you could hang it up versus just letting it sit around, or at least have the option to hang it up. I did that for the last two. So I think I'm going to drill a hole through here. That way we can put a little hanger and hang it up. So I just glued this block up, and so then that should be all nice and dry tomorrow. And then I can start working on cutting and shaping. And then most likely I'll do the slot in there again first. That will be the biggest fun. The nice thing is this is just about long enough that I might be able to put it on the table saw and just run it this way along, instead of having to use the small parts fence, since this is the direction it's going to go. If you just have a little narrow thing, that's not safe. But here I might be able to get it lined up. Well, I'll cut it so it's flat first, and then run it right along, and that should let me cut the hole perfect to fit in here. That should be a little bit easier and more straightforward than using the small parts sled, at least. So yeah, there's options on how to get that to fit. We'll see which one I do. Most likely it'll be table saw, because that has the better dust collection than the router table does, at least for if I'm using a straight bit. Alright, so that plan worked. So I figured out that if we do approximately 16 or 17 30 seconds from the edge, that should be approximately centered in the block. And then what I did was I took a practice piece, and even though it wasn't quite as wide, I wanted to make sure that when I cut the slot that this would fit down in. So I took the practice piece over, plopped it on the table saw, and then because I have the gripper with the side hold attachment, I was able to put that in place, and this was much easier to do with the wider block versus a narrow block like I did before. But with the wider block, it was wide enough that I was able to do this. So center it up on there, put it up against, run it through, do the other side, run it through, and then clear out the center. And interestingly enough, this board that was, this was originally part of a door frame for my cabinet, this piece of maple for the handle. And from here to there, 21 inches away, it is a different enough thickness that on this end, it fits right in just perfectly smooth. And on the other end, it's a hard friction fit. So that just shows you or reiterates the fact that woodworking is not an exact science like metal. Metal, you need to have the same thickness the entire thing. Woodworking, you can have a 64th the whole length and nobody's going to know, or 64th, 128th, whatever that ends up being. Nobody's going to know or care most of the time unless you're doing a fit like that. So that's good. So now I have this piece that I can put the handle in and glue that up. So put that in like that, glue that all up, and then that should give me enough room to have a nice curve coming up for the top to make it, instead of a right angle piece, have it curved along the side so it blends in, and also from the side have it curved and up around, and then have the back side curved. So I think it's going to work pretty good. So next, now that I got it cut, I will glue it up, and then tomorrow I will be able to start the shaping process. And like I said, I'm going to do some bandsaw work first to get the rough outline sorted, and then I'll probably use the 12-inch drum sander again to get some of the curves set, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, I think this is going to work nice. And with the way the grain works, well, you could have seen it before I cut it, but basically, because of the way the grain works in the two blocks, it actually matches, because I bookmarked it, because this was originally the same piece that I just trimmed. So it actually runs this way, and so when it's all sanded smooth, it actually looks like the same block of wood, which that's kind of cool. So that should mean it'll look nice for the top of the back scratcher. Yeah, next part, glue. After using my smaller bandsaw for its first project of trimming the extra chunks off, which went fairly well, and I worked on using some files and rasps and such. And I drilled a hole in the end. But yeah, we got a nice, very smooth two-piece back scratcher. The grain shows up the most on the back where the flats are. Turns out that fancy grain in maple, once it's curved, it just goes back to regular maple. But that's fine. The top worked. The two pieces, I think, glued together just nice. It's hard to hold, but so I think that's going to work really good. So that should be a nice rounded, gradually shaped top, which is what was requested. It has a cool color, and I'm assuming that the color is going to pop a bit more once I put finish on it. But yeah, I think that's going to work good. These are smaller teeth because that was also requested, but I think that should work good. And yeah, I think it's going to work nice. Maple definitely sands much smoother because it's harder than the pine, but yeah, I should make it a very pretty, very nice, and it feels really good too. And I left on the back a little bit more of a flat. It's hard to tell in the picture, but you can kind of see there. It's a bit more of a flat. That way you can kind of tell just with your hand where the back of it is. That way if you have it down your shirt and such and you're trying to go, you're not trying to scratch your back with this part or the side, which will happen if you have a completely round piece. But because I left the flat on the back, I think that's gonna work. So next is just put some finish on, and then we should be good to go. I like it so far. All right, the latest back scratcher is done. It came out really cool. The grain on the maple is really nice. And the maple up at the top is good. And it's best down the back side because that's more flat. And it turns out, as I said in the previous part, that grain shows up best in flat stuff, not on rounded areas. I mean, it's there, but you can see these little colored pieces are the same stuff that shows up as the streaks, but because it's rounded, it doesn't show up as a streak. But yeah, that came out really nice. Even though it's hard to keep it in focus, but you can see it in the sunshine that it came out really good. So yeah, she is going to really like it. So now I just gotta get in gear and actually make a website or something to start selling this stuff, because the people who have ordered them are very happy. I just don't have a good way for people to order them. So for now, until I do that, if you want a back scratcher or a fancy box or something else, let me know. But yeah, this came out really cool.